Well, that's exactly correct. And then that's my solution to work-life balance. I just work. So everybody else in the team can go on vacations.
Welcome to At the Fence Line with your hosts, Sarah Chambers and Gavin Bedker.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the At the Fence Line podcast with your regular hosts, Sarah Chambers and Gavin Bedker. And back for, is this the second or third time you're back, Terry?
I think it's numero 2.
Numero 2. Terry is back. How many languages are we going to cram in today? You want to
Oh, you don't want me to go beyond a couple.
Okay.
One.
Okay. We are back. We're back from a bit of a break. Hey, Gavin, we took a bit of a pause.
Yeah, work's getting busy and there was some vacations involved and back at it.
Yes. So, Terry, you are the CEO of Backswath. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind when I say the next things. So, Gavin, where did you go on vacation?
I went south. I went to El Salvador. So
Amazing.
I have a close friend who was originally from El Salvador, and my group of friends, we finally went and visited his home country, and it was fantastic. If you're looking for a place that's like a little bit off the beaten path, but not like there's still everything you need there, and it's quite safe. I never felt unsafe there.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would say, it's great. Yeah.
Ask me where I went on my vacation.
Nah.
I went to Mexico. I was just outside of Cancun for a couple of weeks, and then we went to Chicago on the way back. So we also had a warm vacation, and mine coincided with the coldest week of the year in Manitoba, which was really great planning on my part. Terry, where did you go on vacation this year, Mr. CEO of Backswath?
Well, that's exactly correct. And then that's my solution to work-life balance. I just work. So everybody else in the team can go on vacations. So that is quite, I don't know, is that okay? It is what it is.
It is what it is. So the topic
I don't begrudge anybody having their vacation. That is, 100%. Glad you guys were able to go.
It's a great segue into the topic for today, which of course is work-life balance. And yeah, it was top of mind for a couple of reasons. Kind of on both sides of the coin, I think. One being that for us, it's our busiest time of year. Obviously, when it's winter, then we have the pleasure of having more attention from the people that we work with. So that makes it a busier time of year for us, which means working more. It was top of mind because, yes, there was some vacations happening when there's snow on the ground. Us Canadians like to run away from that. And then it was also top of mind because I've been seeing a lot of stuff online about moms working, work-life balance, how moms are balancing careers and having babies and all that kind of good stuff. So we had a chat about it and thought that it could be a really interesting episode from our three different perspectives. And like I would weigh heavily, I think our listeners will relate the most to to Terry's perspective. There's a train in the background. I can hear it.
And there's never a train here. It just so happens that it's now.
I don't think I've ever heard a train in the back. We'll see if our production can edit that one out. If not, it's not the worst sound.
And it is a train that moves very slowly. And it crosses 2 crossings.
And makes a lot of noise. Yeah, got it.
I think it's done now.
Sure, no problem. So couple different perspectives. Terry, I think most of our listeners will relate best to you and yours, being the owner of the business, the big boss who has to really form an opinion on work life balance and what that means for not only you, but for your employees as well. And then Gavin and I fit kind of nicely into these two different categories of employees, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of the basis for our conversation today. I think it's also, you know, something that we talk to farmers a lot and we encourage it a lot, obviously, is to be really mindful of what they're focusing on when and, being self aware enough to recognize when too much is too much and what can they do to mitigate getting to that point. But it's one of those things, the more we talk about it, I think the more commonplace it can be to advocate for yourself and your own needs when it comes to balancing your life in that way.
Comment already?
Yeah, go for it.
So what do you do when you're fully aware that too much is too much and you have no idea how to break through that too much scenario and all it feels like is, yeah, it's going to be too much.
Gavin?
It's a bit of a rhetorical question, but it's something
Yeah,
to talk about.
it's
Yeah.
rhetorical. Well, I'm surprised, Sarah, that you said Gavin, speak to it. You're the pro at getting the conversation started and having the communication around it. Um, I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. I think it's something that the team has to figure out together.
I really love what you just said there because I think my response, rhetorical or not, would be to ask for help. So what you just said about the team kind of getting together and resolving it from that group mindset, I think is exactly, yeah, that's what I would say.
I want to add something. So I think we preface this conversation around work life balance heavily towards making sure work doesn't overrun your personal life.
Mm,
But I also want to acknowledge that there are busy times. There are demands where, if they're not met, can really, affect your bottom line on your farm. And so let's just put that out there too, that it is a balance, right? And so it involves both sides of the equation.
mhm. And that's where I think I thought that Terry's perspective would be especially interesting and relatable because um, so at Backswath, one of our values is family, and you live that value through really giving a lot of grace for our team and their personal needs and how that might kind of flow into the day. So, can you talk a little bit about how you developed that perspective and how you overcome when it's being challenged?
Yeah, well, I can. I don't profess to have all the answers for this. Um, I know what I've come to value over time, and you identified one of those values being family. And of course, the people that I work with are, in a way, my work family. I guess you could call it that way. There's a lot of farms out there that think of the people that work with them as part of their work family, and I think would apply some of the same principles. But there's some urgency that farms manage within that we don't, that I don't. They have urgency around the seasonality of what they do, and then the urgency around weather that impacts on the seasonality of what they do. So while be somewhat easier perhaps for me to be respectful of my work family and their need to create the balance. Um, I don't know that that always can be the same for some of the farm families that, or for I'm going to say most of the farm families that we work with. Anyway, back to how I've come to appreciate that is the if you're going to profess to have value, then you've got to live the value. And when it comes to family, then that work life balance, I respect that. Well, the other thing that I've come to learn or come to understand, that's a better way to describe it, is we get caught up a lot in the urgency or the due date of what we do. And I'm not going to trivialize the fact that if a report's got to get filed, it's got to get filed. But I've to my point of what I've come to understand, if the report didn't get filed that day, uh, there's tomorrow, and yeah. So what am I trying to say here? That I don't think you can present the culture within the business in that anything goes and there's no accountability back to work. But at the same time, if somebody needs some time away, then I think they should take the time away. Um, I don't do that easily. Well, Gavin, Gavin may know, but Sarah, I don't always do that easily when when I'm looking for somebody and I open up their schedule and they're not at work and and I didn't know that. And that's again, that probably is on me. I don't think everybody needs to be reporting in all the time what they're doing. But my point is that I do find that causes me some angst at times, especially when I am looking for something. But again, I've learned that, if you let it go, don't react in the moment. There's usually a better outcome to the situation. So how or the timing at which something within the work-life balance conversation of an employee who perhaps is being not working, is balancing more towards life than to work. I've got to take a pause, take a time out, and try not to react in the moment. And I
Mhm.
think that results in better outcomes. Yeah. I mean, I'll carry on. Um, in one of the peer groups that I facilitate, well, we talk about work-life balance in a lot of the peer groups that I facilitate. That's a pretty common topic because there's usually something going on in some farm's family that there appears to be some unevenness around the work contribution of some of the members in the family. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah.
And we got to talk about it. So it comes up in a peer group meeting. And I remember something that resonated with me. One of the farmers in the group said, it's not really an issue of work-life balance. It's a work balance because they can work every single day of the year. And we could work. I mean, I could work 24/7. There's always work to be done. So is it work-life balance or is it work balance? And I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I just thought that was very kind of an interesting take on what we're talking about.
Mhm. Gavin, anything to add?
No, well, nothing really to add on top of that, but I'll just reinforce what Terry was saying about how we do things at Backswath. And we try to like we try, but we also just live similar values to our clients. All of us here today have ties to agriculture. Terry farmed. I farmed a little bit. Sarah, you've got an animal science degree and have lots of connections to rural Manitoba. We have an understanding of what farms go through, but from the Backswath perspective, um, yeah, Terry's flexible, and if something can't get done today, there's a lot of well, can we talk about it tonight? Can we talk
Mhm.
about it on the weekend? Can we talk about it the next day? So I just want to reinforce that approach. And when flexibility is available, I think take it. Um, but I think we should maybe segue into what happens when flexibility is not there. What happens when like Terry said, when constraints around weather and timing are hard or harder, and it's it's time to go. I think then, um what an employee or what a farm management member might be facing with is who's your support team? Who do you have around you that can help you get through that? And I know that that varies a lot individually. So that's kind of my segue into maybe the next bit of our conversation.
Yeah, I think that I often, my mind goes to the employee. I think about the just the nature of what I do. That's who kind of comes to me first. And so I think that beyond, exactly what we said about being able to communicate those things with your team to get support. I think that, and back to what Terry was saying about culture, is that having a culture of communication in the workplace where even your employees feel like if it's too much, if they're overwhelmed, that they have the ability to come and talk about that. And from the employer perspective, normally that means, creating the space for that in the first place, whether it be a preseason chat, a mid-season check-in, after a long day, sending a text message when the person's on their way home saying, "Hey, how are you feeling after today? That was a really long one." Whatever it might be, but just kind of communication being able to go both ways, and making sure that the environment for that is primed. No one disagrees. It must mean that I'm a genius.
No, I don't take my silence as anything but, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Uh, what well, go ahead, Gavin. I got something else I wanna talk about, but what were you gonna say?
Well, just yeah, listening and I think trying really hard to listen between the lines. It reminded me of and this is now my memory trying to go back about 15 years. We were harvesting late into the night, and there was a breeze. So as the night gets a little bit longer, the dew sets in, and it gets harder and harder to combine to harvest. And I just remember the hours just getting later, and um, on the radio there was an employee, Sarah, not an owner, so not someone who directly invested into the crop, someone who's making an hourly wage and doing the best they can and wanting to do the best they can, and that person was obviously tired, and they started to talk about how it sounded like the combine was struggling a little bit more, working a little bit harder, which is a result of more moisture around.
Mhm.
And maybe not the best reply, but like to your point, the reply on the radio was, "Oh, is that the combine talking or is that you talking?" That was the reply.
Ouch.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Again, that was, about 15 years ago, and maybe we've learned a little bit, or maybe we haven't. Maybe that's something to think about.
I think that, it's interesting how that conversation shifts when like around arm's length employees versus non. I've been
Right.
talking with a lot of farms about this lately, is about, the assumption of our arm's length employees and, what their commitment level is. So, I mean, yeah, that comment's a little bit not great. Um, but I've
But
I
understandable, right? I mean, from the owner's perspective, they wanna go, 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 and then you've got this balance, right, between how you wanna manage your employees.
See, and this is where yeah, 100% and absolutely. And so I think that for me, what I have seen really successful farms doing, and success in terms of, you know, HR management and work life balance management, is that they're willing and open to be a little bit more creative to how they might structure their busy times of year. So, yes, we understand that there are certain times of the year when it's go, and it is, days that literally don't end. They roll into the next one, and that just is what it is, but it doesn't mean that your team has to kind of take the brunt of that. And I think that, if you are truly running an operation where, you don't have enough people to be cycling through and have the ability to give people the time that they need, then it sounds to me like you're a big farm with not enough employees. Like there's, ways to kind of work that in so that the people that are working for you really feel seen and appreciated, and like you are living your values if one of them is family. and running people to the ground just isn't that. So I think there's ways to get around that so that people are never in that situation to begin with.
Yeah, I agree. That would be an acknowledgement and an understanding of the current situation, and then planning for better results
Mhm.
next, right? In the moment, is there some advice that you would give for how to maybe respond differently? Because in the moment, right, it's hindsight's 2020. We can plan better for next year, but in that
Mhm.
moment, is there any coaching you would offer for a different?
Well, yeah, like anybody who has worked with me before that listens to this, any of the farms that I build contracts with are gonna laugh because I like to include a clause about, a paid hour rest break when operating equipment for long periods of time, and it's like I always say to people when I'm going through it that, like, this is where the debates come in, and I love it, you know? So some people don't like it, and we take it out, and then other people leave it in, but again, I so the clause talks about how, if you are operating equipment for extended periods of time and you feel fatigued, that you can take a paid hour rest until you're ready to run equipment again, ready to safely operate again. And if after that hour you're still feeling too tired, then you go home and obviously take an unpaid rest, like your shift would be finished for the day. And I like that because it's really upfront talking about culture of safety, that's the number one priority. I mean, it also speaks to work-life balance and rest and things like that, the health of our employees. But, yeah, I that's what my response would have been in that moment. Well, the part of Sarah that the perfect manager Sarah, the real manager Sarah maybe would have said something different, but it would be, yeah, like, if you're feeling tired, hey, it's okay to pause for a bit. It like
So one thing there, you'll find more and more farm families that used to, like years ago, a generation ago, stop the combine at dinner time, supper time, and everybody had ate together. And then I knows when I farmed, that was, are you kidding me? That's an hour or 45 minutes of go time because it's right at 5 or 6 o'clock, right? So that culture changed at a lot of farms, but now recently they're reverting back to trying to take some time for people to take a break, get together. And not only does it help with that, that work-life balance kind of conversation, but it builds a different culture or supports a different culture within the business that I think a lot of farmers are trying to get back to.
mhm. Yeah, well, and I think it's a lot of what attracts people into the industry is those it's that, idea of what the busy times of year look like.
What do you do though, you guys? What do you do? You're a farmer. What do you do when you know or you what we're talking about in having a balance within the work that the employees provide to get done on the farm? What do you do when you absolutely agree with that, but you're you can't find the people to work? And there's so much work to be done, and while you would like to have more time aside and you'd like to have equipment breaks and what everything we've talked about, but what happens when it's literally out of their control? They don't have enough people, and yet the work's got to get done. How do you deal with that? They,
I think that's it's an absolutely relevant and important question. I think that might Terry, I just gonna say I think that might be a separate topic altogether, right? That's the whole planning, HR, big picture planning.
Mm.
And I know I made a separate comment or an earlier comment about, okay, yeah, well, we can plan for next year better. Um, if the owners and managers don't have enough resources on hand in the current year, we could talk about those things.
Mhm. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So, then I have yet another rabbit hole to go down, you guys.
Sure.
So, what happens when we're talking about work-life balance, right? What happens when there's disruption in the situation? what happens when something occurs that disrupts that balance? So you guys know full well that I had a business partner and she abruptly left, and that caused a huge disruption in my personal work-life balance because there needed to be then the work to be done, and who was going to do it? So that changed from me, where I was in a pretty good personal space. Uh, from a work-life balance, I was working more on the terms that I wanted to work on, but that disruption occurred and then basically flipped my balance kind of upside down. And I think there's farms out there that experience those kinds of disruptive events. And I guess maybe it's somewhat similar to the question I just posed previously, Gavin, with going down another whole discussion about what to do in a situation like that. But I think there's something to that. And if I may, I'll just carry on then, because uh, if you're well, what I experienced is, how do I portray to the team um, how I'm feeling about my own personal approach to work and life balance? And I continue to try not to present any um, explicit angst or anxiety or um, comments about, man, there's so much work to be done, and I didn't go to Mexico or El Salvador, and but that's a little bit tongue in cheek. I mean, if I wanted to go to Mexico or El Salvador, I would go. But are you following what I'm saying? Like so if you're a farmer and you got a team of people working with you, and you got to kind of work within some of the dynamics of the business that impact most directly on he or she, how do they manage to portray the calmness of what they would like to in terms of work-life balance? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I feel like it's this, are we talking about planning for the future where there's an ideal setup and there's lots of resources around and we can manage that? Or are we dealing with the unexpected? How do we deal with that in the moment, in the season? And so, Sarah, interested to hear what you think. Which way do you want to track the conversation right now?
Well, I mean, I'm, like, laughing a bit because I wish you wouldn't have, I wish we would have left it just, like, ambiguous as this situation instead of you directly tying it to you. Because now it's gonna sound like I'm just sitting here saying that, what you did was wrong, but so just listening to what you're describing, what I wish would have happened in your specific circumstance was, if we take it all the way back to the very first comment we made, was relying on the people around you and communicating that you have a need. Like, so that I think could have done a better job of you leaning on the supports that you had, because I think you did have people that really wanted to support you. And so then if I go even further back, why were those people there? Because there'll be people listening to this that will say, well, my employees would never offer to help in a situation like that because they just want to work their hours and then go home at the end of the day. So even further back, and why I think you can add even more value to this discussion, is the environment that you created before the disruption happened. And so this goes to what Gavin is saying about pre-planning, but I'm not necessarily talking about the resources that you had in place. I'm talking about the culture that you built. And you built that culture by living your values. So, it wasn't like you only started promoting work-life balance after disruption occurred. You've been promoting it for as long as I've worked with you, which is, years and years prior. So I think that if you're living your values, you're connecting with employees that want to support your business in that way. They feel connected to the success of your business. And so then when disruption occurs, because farmers are going to do what they always do. They're going to get it done, right? Like if we don't have extra people to call in and we're trying to get we're just going to get it done, and we want our employees to do the same. So what the conversation becomes is whether the employees are willing to or not, and then their willingness is probably based off the culture that you've created in your business.
Hmm. Yeah.
So welcome to Therapy Hour with Sarah, Terry Becker. And anytime you need me to tell you what to do,
What is
I'm
it?
right here.
We need to stand with the 5 cents. Well, I'll pay my 5 cents and like,
Should I put like a gypsy hat on or something and get a
don't
crystal
know, like,
ball and
Snoopy on Peanuts. So
not
that
the visual I was going for, but sure, I'll be Snoopy. That's so I mean, and I've been having lots of conversations lately about culture development, because it's another thing that I get asked about constantly is how to improve the culture on my business and with my employees. And I think living your values is really number one. It's getting those values not to just be a piece of paper that's up on the wall in the coffee room, but really using them as a tool for decision making. And so then that's when I'll tie it back. And so most people know about me that my second child was born with she's medically complex. And so for you, Terry, as the employer, that meant really having to make some giving a lot of space to me. You didn't have to, but that's your values, and so you lived them in that way, and even when it wasn't convenient for the business, you made sure that you were making decisions based off of that value. And so, you're
yeah.
not allowed to tell me if I'm wrong, I'm just gonna say it, but, I would like to think I've invested more back into the business because of that, because, we live in this culture where we wanna get the job done, but we respect what's going on outside of work as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to live what it is we're talking about.
Uh,
That's the interesting piece. That's an interesting piece of this. But I have yet another rabbit hole to go down. So I got a question for you guys then. When we're talking about work-life balance, what how do you anticipate uh, a younger generation is going to approach the subject that we're talking about? So let's take a Western Canadian, you know, fairly decent sized farm that have family members and employees working on it. And the parents are 60 years old. Okay. Like what mature and the farm is well established. The next generation's coming along, having observed how their parents have managed this whole discussion around life and work. How do you think the next generation's going to see their way through this, you guys?
I love that question, because I think Gavin and I can think of examples we both have of farms that are kind of in that situation where um there's other things that bring them a lot of joy besides farming. And so for them, farming is viewed as a career, but there's still other things that they want to make time for. And so how are they working that in? What I see is more of a willingness to outsource um, a lot of what they do. So it's not a given that a family member is going to be doing the books, or it's not a given that they're going to be the main equipment operator. They maybe really like doing the strategy and, financial analysis for the business, but they're outsourcing labor to do a lot of the equipment stuff, so that they have time to do the parts of the business that they like, the part of their career that they really want to foster and grow. And then they also have time to do things other than that. I think I'm seeing that more and more with the clients that I work with the farms that I work with.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a shift. I don't think it's a radical shift, but it's a shift because there are still things that just need to get done. But with more careful planning, which I think the next generation is adopting, they're just more capable of managing through it with the stuff that we talked about earlier in the conversation, with identifying priorities like what Sarah said, and with making sure the team is solid. And in that generation, in that just one generation, farms have gotten, on average, so much bigger and worth so much more money that the planning and all that stuff is so much more important. And I just want to acknowledge as well that we tend to work with, I think a little bit more leading farms and bigger farms
Mhm.
than the average farm. But the same general principles apply to all farms, tending to get bigger and with a little bit of a shift towards a mindset of running it like a business, it
Mm.
can take a little bit of that pressure off. But it's not a radical shift to, I'm just going to live my life and head into the farm for 7, 8 hours a day and and that's going to be enough. No, that's
Yeah.
no. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if as well because now there's more family members that are working off farm. So this idea of needing to preserve something for all three of my children to do if they wanted to become it's like less pressure. Because that idea of, like you said, it's, more of a business and less of a family enterprise. I wonder if that maybe for future generations, they're feeling less pressure to uphold the legacy, and I'm totally speculating. I'm not suggesting that that is, but
I I think it's going to flip, Sarah. I
Mm,
think there's going to be a whole maybe there's going to be a different realization of the responsibility comes for the uh, younger generation. That's how I'll describe them, not the ones that are not the generation that's imminently close to retiring. I sense that there's going to be an increase in what that generation feels is their responsibility to
mm,
protect that for future generations. And I think that's a dynamic that's not existed in Western Canada before, simply because, well, families, farm families didn't come close to generating or accruing the amount of wealth up to
mm.
2005 that they have in the last 20 years. Well, I think this discussion is going to change going forward. And what I think is, well, as much as perhaps, and I don't mean to, what disrespectfully characterize a younger generation of wanting to place more emphasis on this discussion around work and life balance. I think there's going to be increasing. I think they're going to feel pressure to err more on the side of work than on the life balance to account for the responsibility they have within the family. Now, that's just my hunch going forward.
That's a big thing for a boomer to comment on. Aren't you normally telling us that we have no work ethic and aren't trying hard enough?
No, yeah, no. Well, that's really interesting. Our generation, we solve. There's a lot of our generation that are farming to solve problems by working harder. It's just a fact.
Mm,
But what we're talking about is that's not popular, and nor should it be now. But I wonder if we're going to find ourselves, or this next generation is going to find itself in this scenario, if you will, in the next 10, 20 years, where they increasingly feel with the responsibility, obligation, whatever the word is you want, to the family to protect that wealth. And one of the ways to do it is to, uh, well, work harder, work smarter, harder.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm, what am I doing? I'm blue sky right now. That's all.
I think it's really interesting because I think there is going to be a cultural and societal shift towards more of a work-life balance. But it's so interesting with 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 farms that own a lot of land and have this equity increased, right? Um, how you balance that, right?
Yeah.
Is yeah.
Guys, I'm old enough to remember the conversations in the 70s where technology was going to result in people having to work 4 days a week. I absolutely remember that. That was the promise. That was the promise. Technology is going to, and what has it done? All it's done is make everything more urgent. It's all now. So what do? We work harder. So
I
I
was gonna
remember
say, how's
that.
that Terry, you use technology every day. How's that 4-day a week life treating you?
Just, just ducky, just absolutely ducky.
Yeah.
I can't wait
It
for
only
Friday.
took 10 minutes to get the right speaker connected for today.
Oh, yeah, 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 exactly. Exactly.
Um, I wanna go down my rabbit hole, if I may, and kind of talk about the, gender of it all as, the woman on the
Oh,
call as only I can. So, I wanna read something and then I want yeah. So, mothers aren't underperforming at work, they're outperforming inside systems that were actively designed without them in mind. I wish we'd start talking about it that way, excuse me. When more mothers are given real support, I think they can execute at a level more effective than anyone else. I believe they should be paid generously and allowed the container for freedom that a life with kids requires. Yes, that's your answer.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want
Absolutely.
us to I wanna talk about because I think any, female farmer listener of this would be like, "Well, what about women in work-life balance?" It's not just about, our employees. There's a whole other piece to the conversation that involves, you know, the family. Most of our farms would say that their number one value is family. And so how are we creating space for mothers to support those values, be a part of that vision?
I've worked with farms that I think have wildly successfully managed through that, and I've seen some farms that have struggled. Like it's a whole range.
So, for the sake of the listeners who are putting themselves somewhere in the category of struggling to figure that out, what did wildly successful look like?
Well, I think I actually have to preface that with I think those farms have benefited from having scale, so it was a little easier. Um, Actually, now that I reflect, just in the moment, I feel like the farms that had scale, that might have been the key. I mean, I don't see a ton of personal or family value differences between those farms, but the farms that had scale were able to plan around it, plan for pregnancy, plan for early childhood, plan for all of that. And the ones who didn't have the scale, it was harder. I don't have, I'm sorry, that's all I've got right now, Sarah.
Terry?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Um, the soon, the sooner, the sooner we Canadian agriculture, Canadian farm agriculture, can get to uh, uh, an equal uh, validation or equal respect for the contribution that the women, mothers, um, sisters, um, nieces bring to the operation, the better off we're all going to be. It is a resource that when I started consulting uh, years ago, um, wasn't anywhere near recognition of the contribution that the women brought to the farms. And I actually had a call yesterday with a young woman who's in a farm and struggling, trying to create what she described, or my words of what she was trying to describe as her space in the management of that business. And she has a contribution to make. So the sooner we can get there, the better. And it ties back a little bit into that work-life balance. Right? If the contribution that the woman, the mother, the daughter is making to that farm is by default, meaning, well, no one else is going to do it. Well, let her do it, or she can do it on top of everything else she or her has to do. Then that can't make for a really happy work-life balance situation to be. We've got to bring structure, Sarah, this is what you do. You got to bring structure to the roles, and then create value to the contribution that those people make within those roles, and then they got to compensate them fairly for it. Then we start to get to a more level playing field of who's providing what contribution to what function, what management function on the farm. And it can be anybody, any gender at all.
Mhm.
I didn't know you were going to bring that up, but I have hugely set opinions on where we need to go. I've watched so many farms attain like great success, and it's not because the men worked harder. It's because there was a contribution from a wife, a mother, a daughter, or somebody of the female gender. Like, that's such a good comment to bring up, Sarah.
And we, the 3 of us here, we are so fortunate because, I'm sure just as I brought this up, one of the dozens of, like, powerhouse female farmers that we get to work with is coming to mind as, like, this example of this incredible woman that's contributing to her farm. I think that it is in those cases where there's been, what I perceive as the most success in, giving women a place and supporting their work, their balance in their life is really when we let women choose their own adventure in the workplace and, again, create the space where they can talk about what they need. But like you said, Terry, don't assume that they're going to fall into certain roles because they're, you know, a woman because they're a wife with kids at home, so it makes the most sense for them to do whatever it might be. I mean, I think that that's where it's a trap. It's a common trap that a lot of farms fall into, and so it should rather be, you know, where does the woman want to sit on the farm, and then how do we support her balance so that she can succeed in that
What?
role?
So why did, and this is a rhetorical question, why did women have to argue to get recognition to be able to contribute to Canada pension? Like, there is some of the inequities just don't make sense, or
Mhm.
didn't make sense, and we are so slow to change.
We're
Yeah,
slow to change, and it's not really that far in the past, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's
yeah,
pretty recent when you
yeah,
think about the
yeah.
grand scheme of things. I just want to go back to my comment about scale, and I kind of copped out on the answer early. Any of those kind of challenges, right, around employee management are going to be solved by scale. And I just want to echo what Terry was saying, that the farms that, and this can be smaller, medium sized, or larger farms, the farms that have the full family and team member buy-in, whether that's the women or the men or all together, um, are more successful. So anticipating, planning around roles and also time off
No,
will yield results. Yeah.
100%. I I'm gonna okay. I'm just gonna put this out there, you guys. I didn't go to consulting school, uh, and how to consult with a farm family. I worked with farm families through a couple of programs, and I thought there was an opportunity to help. So I left the farm and started Backswath. And of course, at that time, it was early 1990s. At that time, there was no such thing as a farm management consultant. No, I mean, basically, what are you doing? And I learned early on how to engage a family in a discussion about their business. And what I learned in there is I'm going to call it reverse, not very the right way to say it. My point of entry into the discussion about with the husband and the wife about how their farm was being managed wasn't through the husband; it was through the wife, because the the wife typically was more open minded, was more receptive to a conversation about what could we do differently. Typically, didn't have their guardrails up. Uh, typically, didn't mind awkward conversations, and Yeah. So if I was going to have, if I was going to be effective in helping a couple in dealing with challenges on their farm, it had to be, it not didn't have to be, it was easier to engage the woman in that discussion and then allow the conversations to carry on. So that goes back a long way. That dynamic rarely exists now, but slow to change. But that's just when we're talking about that. I can remember that, the realization of, hey, there's two people involved in this business, and one typically doesn't have much of a voice. But now those voices are more equal, as they should be.
Are you saying that women were better early adopters of farm management practices, Terry?
I'm saying that women were better early adopters of paying for a consultant, Gavin.
And having the conversation. Hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I work with more farm families that have both the husband and the wife both involved. I work with more farms that have that dynamic than where it's just one or the other. And I
Yeah,
don't know if that's a result or a driver. That's my observation as well. So
yeah.
still holds true today, I
One,
think. Yeah.
one of the things that's enabled that discussion is is that the business has changed. So it used to be where if you were stronger, you were more capable. But with the technology, who's driving combines and tractors and milking cows, and no, you don't have to be able to bench press 400 pounds to be able to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Gavin, if you just in summary, if you were to, um, I don't want to say give one piece of advice, but if there was one takeaway that you would hope someone would leave listening to this with regards to supporting work life balance for themselves, for their employees, for their family, what would that be?
Okay. I think my answer would be it's going to be like a compound sentence. So I'm going to kind of cheat and put two answers in one.
Go for it.
Okay. So make sure you have a robust plan for the coming years. Because if you don't, it will make current unexpected situations more difficult. And then when you're dealing with those current unexpected situations, try to just live your values, listen, and realize that there's a difference between you as an owner or manager and someone who can have a wildly different support team behind them. So um, that was that was one sentence, just by the way. That was
Yeah,
one
way to
sentence. Yeah,
steal whatever Terry and I were gonna say. I think that mine would be get creative, and I would reiterate,
yeah,
plan and live by your values. But
yeah.
yeah, get create try looking at things from a different perspective. It's the way that things have always been done does not have to be the way that they're always done going forward. Terry, if there was one thing that you wanted listeners to take away with regards to supporting work life balance for themselves, their family, their employees, what would it be?
Well, as your guys' collective boss, you know that if you say one thing, if I feel like saying three things, I'm going to say three things. Okay, I'm going to start here, and thank you for letting me go last because it allowed me to think a little bit about what would be that one thing. Okay, well, work-life balance, farming. What are we talking about? We're talking about people. We're talking about people and behaviors. Okay, so how do we start to respect behaviors, recognize the behaviors, et cetera, et cetera? Well, that falls into the domain of how do we manage our human resources? How do we manage on the farm the resource that is our people? That's human resources. And that people resource includes mom and sister, not just all the paid employees. So, um, respect the contribution that that female gender provides to the business, and by defining what the roles are, what the contribution is that they're bringing to the business. Right? Because if there's no specific role identified, how then do we speak or understand the value that those people are contributing to the business? Okay. So then there's yet one more step. So I have watched farms look at me cross-eyed years ago when I said, one of the things you guys need to look at is managing your human resources. I don't want to do that. Okay. So that has now become generally accepted as a really critically important piece of farm management. But there was a progression over time of what that meant. And it is working, by my observation, in the right direction, where more farms now have roles and detail around the contribution that everyone is bringing to that business. Okay, that's good. There is one more step forward, one more thing that I think they can do, and I'm going to answer your question here. They need to set up a proper compensation program. Oh, what's attached to those roles that are provided by everybody in the farm, including the mother, the aunt, the daughter, whoever, is how are they being compensated for the contribution that they're making to the business? So when we get to that level of is it equanimity? Is that the right word? Equalness or an equal contribution of value in the business, then I think we will have got to the other side of the bridge. And it's just ongoing implementation. I talked to a farm family last week. It's different than the one I referenced a minute ago, last week. And I said, well, how much are you guys paying yourself? And the the man was getting paid $90,000, and his spouse, the woman, was getting paid $36,000. Well, they first asked me, how much do you think we should be getting paid? And I said, oh, I don't know, like $125,000, $150,000, because you can't find someone to come in and run a 10,000 acre farm, pay them 40. You'll never find anybody. Well, they laughed. They not laughed. They giggled. They didn't laugh. They giggled. And I thought, oh, maybe I have understated what they were actually, what their compensation looked like. And then they told me that. And I said, well, I think compensate yourself fairly. And that becomes subjective, whatever that fair is, but it should reflect the value of the contribution each of them were bringing to the farm. And I know the couple, and the value of the contribution she brings is different, but equal to the value of her spouse. So I think, Sarah, one of the things that we can still strive to get towards is fair compensation, proper, appropriate compensation. And I say that respecting that sometimes, there's not cash flow for it, so be it. But if there's no cash flow, it doesn't mean that the compensation isn't set at, $90,000, and then they collectively decide, well, we can only afford to pay us $36,000. But at least there's recognition for, hey, that's the compensation attached to that contribution. That's what I think.
Beautiful segue into our next episode. We're actually doing a two-part series coming up on compensation.
On
So thanks. You
compensation,
didn't
yeah.
know that before this
I didn't
moment,
even
but
know that.
there you go.
I
So
didn't even know that.
it's almost like we planned it, but we didn't. So thanks for that, Terry. Is there anything else that either of you want to say before we wrap up?
Not for me, thanks. Just thank you for listening, and please send us feedback. We'd love to
Mm,
hear from you.
yeah. Terry, anything from you?
Yeah, I just finished watching some of the Olympics. I'm so proud to be a Canadian.
Mm, word.
Me too,
Absolutely.
eh? Yeah, that was good.
Um, Yeah, absolutely. I don't have anything else to say. I think this was a great chat. These conversations could go on and on. It's a constantly evolving thing. So thank you very much, Terry, for joining us today and giving your perspective as a business owner, as a boss, on supporting work-life balance for yourself and your employees. Still working on it for the yourself piece, I think, but one
And as
day.
someone who's farmed and been in agriculture for, I think, close to 50 years now, eh? Or 50 or more years.
Yeah. Yeah, a long time.
Favorite matter
Yeah.
speaker.
I I never wanted a job, Gavin. I went to university, getting a job. I was, I don't want a job. And I've had a job all my life. It's the best ever. Best thing ever is talking to farm families. Just best ever.
Second.
Third.
There we go. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks for listening in. Like Gavin said, we would love to hear from you. So please send us any feedback that you might have, or let us know in person, which, we always love getting the feedback as well. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye for everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of At the Fence Line with Sarah Chambers and Gavin Bedker.